What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of 7 Rift Team's live pod, here to talk about patch 14.10 coming out in about a week and a half, I suppose. This is coming in a little early. I don't expect there to be much, if any, reactive balance next week, and so taking a somewhat earlier stab at this. Now, keep in mind, we've still got, as of time of recording, this is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and a bit of Wednesday to make changes. Technically, we can go into Thursday. We tend not to. And so this is probably not going to be final, but a lot of the directions are going to be there. And so let's talk about, at least in broad strokes, what's going into patch 14.10. Alrighty. Of course, as per typical for these videos, I'm baiting and switching you. Quick preamble here. One topic of discussion I've seen a bit recently in the community, at least the English-speaking community, is my usage of I versus we in videos like these. And I have a good reason for it, so let's talk about it. In general, the way it works is designers are responsible for their own individual work. So if I am assigned to go, I don't know, nerf Talia or something, then I'm going to be doing the research and making the call on what I think is correct to do for Talia. And if I weren't the lead of the team, I'd be going to my lead and saying, hey, here's what I want to do. Does it make sense? Should we do this? And then would get approval or be like, actually, have you thought about this? And then if it's like, hey, do you think about this? I'm like, I did. I think it's the right choice. Then, okay, cool, whatever. But ultimately, I would still be the one responsible for that work itself. Now, of course, as the design lead, I am both an individual contributor in that I personally put in changes and whatnot, but also I'm kind of design sign-off. And so not only am I partially signing off on my own work, and to be clear, part of the reason I have this job is because I'm capable of doing so to a reasonable degree, but I'm also responsible for signing off on other people's work doing this stuff as well. So someone comes in and says, I want to nerf Gragas. I'm like, okay, tell me why. Okay, what are you trying to do here? Okay, cool, this makes sense. Yes, no, whatever. And so I'm involved in other people's live balance changes as well. Now, to be clear, I am not on the seasonal pod. There's a whole bunch in this patch specifically that is from the seasonal pod of SRT. I do not have any design oversight over those people. That is not my job. That's not my responsibility. There is a different design lead for the seasonal pod, and he signs off on that kind of stuff, right? And then even beyond that, it still overall ladders up into my, as well as the seasonal lead's boss, Phroxon, who is the lead gameplay designer, and so he oversees all of modes and champions team and the two SRT pods and etc. Right, and so based on how hands-on he wants to be, he can dictate, do this change. He's talked to me a lot about champion durability, for example, is something that he's been sort of putting pressure on live to do. But also at the end of the day, when we run a balance meeting and people pitch in what they think we should change and what are good nerfs, what are good buffs, what are good reworks or whatever. And again, there's a lot of opinions from a lot of different places, right? It's not only just SRT but surrounding teams as well who come in, people who are just involved in League of Legends gameplay and suggest changes and whatnot. Sure, a large portion of accepting that SRT live is going to do a certain bit of work is going to be my job. But literally my job is to say, yes, SRT live is going to do these things. And then basically I interact with Phroxon several times over the course of a patch to be like, here's what we picked up, here's what we're going to do, here's the direction that we're going in each of these changes. Do these make sense? Will you sign off on them? Ultimately, this stuff still goes through my boss. And so, for example, we reviewed 14.10 recently, and I'm like, here's the gold XP changes. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what the results are going to be from what we can tell from playtesting, and here's what we tried. Okay, cool. Here's Corky going on here. Here's what's this. Here's that. Here's that. Here's these changes. Here's these changes. He's like, oh, I have a suggestion here. Have you tried this? Have you tried this other thing? Sometimes that bears fruit. Sometimes it doesn't. Okay, here's the other thing. Here's these items we're changing. How do you feel about this and that? Here's this direction here. Okay, what about this thing? And so all this stuff still goes through proper channels, right? There's nothing that I can put in that does not have some level of oversight. But to circle back to the point of this topic is the I versus we, is that we as SRT Live, or even we as SRT, it's a team I have a lot of visibility into because I sit by all these people who are doing all the seasonal stuff here. But at the end of the day, I will use I when it's something that I have directly put in because I have much more knowledge of the space, right? So for example, I might interrogate a live designer's like Talia buff or something to some level, like, does it make sense, whatever, but like I'm not going to ask this guy to explain every single bit of his thought process and take up all of our time forever because that's just not a good use of time. designers are responsible for their own work. They're somewhat responsible for checking to make sure that what they did was good, but we check on win rates and play rates and whatnot. I don't want to go on this for too long. We're almost 5 minutes in the video, but ultimately, designers are responsible for their own work, and I use I when I did the implementation myself and did the heavy thinking myself, because I can give a lot more context that way into what's going on. And I can't get the same level of context when it's someone else, because I don't live in their brain. And so to me, this is a very reasonable delineation. Hopefully this makes sense going forward. Let's move on. So last patch was actually pretty interesting. There's I didn't think the champion rate adjustments were going to be a very big deal. It turns out they were a really, really big deal, which surprises me, but it is what it is. So I don't believe we are fully done with this, because it turns out there's a very meaningful amount of win rate impact, which means that we should actually pay extra special attention and get the rest of it done, because it really matters for gameplay. So for those who weren't super playing close into the last patch, we changed a few different things about 2 to 3 dozen champions. For about 5 of them, we changed their actual gameplay radius, which is how wide they are for things like auto attacks and skill shots. There's a couple we changed how wide they are for things like pathing. That doesn't often tend to matter, but it can, of course. And we also changed a couple dozen champions in terms of how easy they are to literally click on. This will not change your auto attack actual range, but how easy it is to right click on them for things like a Veigar ulti, such that the client says, oh, you clicked on them. So it was pretty inconsistent. I wrote down a smattering of champions win rate changes here. And of course, some of this, there's going to be biases because items changed around. So Garen was a big Sterix purchaser, around 14% of his games, and of course, Sterix got weaker. That would not explain 1.1% win rate. Garen got easier to click on and lost over 1% win rate. Victor got harder to click on and no direct mage changes and gained about 0.5% of win rate. But similarly, we had Azir get larger and Bard get larger, and there was basically no measurable change in win rate. Darius got, I believe it was harder to click on, but his model size in terms of his gameplay radius got smaller, and he gained 1% win rate. Jace got easier to click on, lost 0.5% of win rate. K'Sante became a larger champion, as well as I believe easier to click on, and lost a whopping 1.7%. Yes, we should clearly buff K'Sante. This is going to be one of the champions that we probably will do some reactive balance on, because holy moly, did not expect K'Sante to lose 1.7% off some model size and click size adjustments. Turns out that's the case. Leona, easy to click on, lost 0.6%. Yasuo and Yone got easy to click on, lost 1%. Zac got, I forget it was easier or smaller to click on, but it was a very meaningful numbers change, and there was no change in win rate. Zoe got moderately harder to click on and gained a pretty large 1.5%. I assume Zoe is so flighty, it's relatively easy to misclick on her, and maybe she's supposed to have a slightly elevated click size, just because she is so flighty and we want the game to be usable. I'm not sure. I haven't investigated this very thoroughly, but it's like, hey, here is a result that now that we've got about 5 games of live League of Legends of data, we can finally measure the win rates of a relatively rare champion like Zoe a bit more accurately, to say. Okay. Additionally, we're also aware there are some bugs with lethality. In the back end, we've done some code updates to certify lethality as a core stat, such that we can put it on items without having to use scripts to do so. The unfortunate thing is there was a arena bug micropatch that went out on Friday that also changed the scripting of some of SR items, and so there are now items on live SR that expect there to be lethality the stat in their script, but lethality the stat isn't coming into the game for items until 14.10. So unfortunately, there are some bugs here with this kind of stuff. We will have to fix them either in a micropatch or we will fix them in 0.10, but regardless, I just wanted to acknowledge that we know there's some weird things going on here. So hey, by the way. Okay, let's talk about this patch itself. It is a pretty big one. It is the large mid-season patch. There's going to be a ranked reset. Oh boy. Okay. So a few headliners, and the first set of these headliners are coming from the seasonal pod, and then eventually we'll talk about the things that live pod is doing, which I can give more context onto. We are doing a rework onto the 80 carry item system. When I did 80 carry item work in 13.10 last year, I knew we were considering removing mythics from the game. And so I intentionally gave them very meager mythic passes, except for Ginsu's Rageblade, which I thought was required to make on-hit champions work, giving them percent pen in their core item. But otherwise, I intentionally made really meager, really bad mythic passes. And so then when we deleted mythics from the game in 14.1, we didn't really change AD carry items around very much. That said, though, Mythic Kraken Slayer is not the same thing as Legendary Kraken Slayer, and so the items eventually got into kind of a weird state because we didn't really rebuild AD carry items for 14.1 to my recollection. But now that we are in a post-Mythic world and we can measure how players actually thought about stuff, actually here's something interesting. So we got some survey data back around 14.1, and average across the player base, every single role thought their items got nerfed. I forget the exact phrasing of it. If it was people thought their items got nerfed or thought their items got nerfed more than other classes. I don't remember which of those. Obviously, that phrasing difference matters. But every single class averaged out thought that their individual class got nerfed. I'm sure there are some players that their stuff got buffed. However, the class that thought they got nerfed the most was AD carries. So, okay, whatever. Perception is reality, right? The point of the game is to be fun. Whatever. Anyway, my understanding is there is some direction here to really try to pay off ADC players in this patch. That's like one of the sub goals here. We'll talk a bit more about it a little bit down the line, but because there's going to be a specific subsection for AD carry items, but hey, there's a big suite of AD carry item changes. We're also doing a bunch of miscellaneous items changes. So fighters and mages are getting a suite of changes coming from the seasonal team. We did a very, very quick pass on tank items and support items on the live pod side. To be clear, this was like one patch's worth of work. It was very, very minor, but there was some stuff done here. One of the designers did a big look at runes and made what I think are some really amazing changes to the rune system. I'm very excited for. A designer took a look at the boot system in the game. I do not know all of his underlying goals for the boot changes. I had one discussion with him around my cursory thought around boots. Does not mean this is what he thought about it or thought that I was correct in any way, but sort of thought about boots for a while and tried to reconcept some changes to boots, which I think are interesting. LivePod took on some work around XP and then ultimately gold income changes as well. The Mighty stuff cannot be PvE scraped. It's all in script. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But some XP changes here as well. LivePod, aka I am shipping a fairly big update to Corki. This may or may not be called a midscope, considering that we're removing the package. You could argue it's called a midscope, so there's a Corki midscope coming in the patch. And then also there is a very quick pass coming from LivePod on summoner spells as well. Again, something that's just kind of one patch's worth of work here, with some earlier thinking being done beforehand. All right, let's go down piece by piece. There is a big suite of AD carry item changes. Most other things you can kind of skip over. As far as item changes are concerned, AD carries is actually a full rebuild of the entire system. The way that I have seen Riot do item changes overall, when you're talking at a really, really large sort of umbrella, is you sort of space out the various kinds of champions who are in the market for your items. So you'd sort of like have like this big sort of like T diagram almost, and it's like, here's Kog'Maw, here's Sivir, here's Jhin, here's Akshan, here's Viego, here's Bel'Veth, kind of, and it's like, all right, where on the sort of number line do these items fall? Are they early purchases? Are they late purchases? What's going on here? And you kind of try to figure out, like, okay, is there an item that is like a good third item for like a Bel'Veth shaped champion? You kind of do that sort of space, right? Again, I am not in all these meetings. I do not know everything that is in these designers' heads, but overall, one of the things that they settled on was 25% crit chance per item. This means that you will get into reliable levels of crit really early. I'm actually a very big fan of crit centering around, like, I'm a big fan of crit not being at 20 or 80, it being 0, 100, or close to 50, I think is a better space. So I'm actually very glad this is happening. So I think this is cool overall. One big thing that's actually happening is they're generally only having 2 stats per item. What it means is there's no AD, AS, and crit purchases. That's one thing that happened with the Mythic system, was we needed Mythic items that were like clearly rushable and clearly good as a first item, and you really, really wanted. And so there was Kraken Slayer, there was Old Shield Bow, there was Gale Force, right? Here's AD, AS, and crit. And it's like, well, now that we're making AD, AS, crit items, we then made more. We had Phantom Dancer with longswords on it for a while. We just had a bunch of items like this, right? And I'm a really big fan. I think it's a really good idea of going back to no item is perfect. You only have 2 stats per item. This can be AD crit, this could be AS crit, this could be AD AS, but you're not getting all 3 anymore. which I think is really cool because I think that is a good way to build a system, because now whatever you buy, you now really, really want something else. You create this sort of sense of anticipation and build completion, which I think is really positive for a progression system such as items, right? For a growth system like this. This also helps really preserve the value of attack speed, because you're not getting it for free from so many sources. You're not getting it, from so many ancillary sources where a real attack speed item can actually matter. I think it's a very big positive for the game overall. So I think this is actually shaped really well. I think this is a good set of changes here. And this is sort of my understanding, interpretation of what's going on. Another thing that was a call from the designer who did these changes was actually codifying percent move speed as a somewhat core stat for AD carries. Much in the same way that ability haste is a core stat for fighters, but not every class has a ton of access to it. But most fighters will get a lot of repeatability out of their items, but they get repeatability out of their abilities, not necessarily repeatability out of auto attacks in the way that AD carries get a lot of attack speed. Move speed as a core stat is like, hey, the core defensive output of an AD carry is going to be staying at range. Now, one concern here is this makes AD carry an even more high skill skewed class. To be fair, though, I think there is a difference between this class only works in highly skilled games, where I'm relying on my team to peel for me and I'm relying on everything else, versus if I just get good, I can do the thing. And so that's one thing I think is going to be interesting to look at, is how AD carries feel across the MR spectrum when just having a high amount of move speed is going to be a very, very good defensive output when you're Gumayushi and not when you're me. I don't have hands. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens here. Additionally, there are a bunch of new non-crit items. So a lot of these items that were already ADAS and everything are just becoming ADAS no crit. This is Kraken Slayer and Shiv specifically. There might be one more if I can't remember off the top of my head. But actually calling out, like, here are a bunch of, like, Amasti, Belveth, Viego, like, you don't need to crit to do your job, but you really want to auto attack to do your job type champions. And this is one thing that live Kraken Slayer does really, really well, is it's actually an item that these, like, non-crit bound melees, aka not Yasuo, Yone, Tryndamere, that these non-crit bound melees are actually buying, so they're not just going like Juggernaut Bruiser type builds, they're actually buying switchy items because the item is so good, they're actually buying it instead. And so this seems to be pushing Kraken and Shiv towards those users, I believe. I don't know if this is expected to be, I just don't know if it's expected to be like a good first item on Conventional Marksman as well. Obviously in something like Kraken Slayer, it's clearly fine on hit users. That actually might be one of the primary goals. For Shiv, I'm not completely certain. But regardless, there is now a larger suite of non-crit items that are explicitly on-hit items, which I think is going to be interesting. We'll see what happens. So now we go into the individual item changes themselves. Bloodthirster is going back to an older version. I believe this is attack damage and lifesteal as the two basic stats, and I believe it's getting the overheal shield back, but now that it's not crit, it is obviously a downgrade to say, oh, I'm not getting crit chance anymore, I'm losing some damage, but I'm getting durability instead. Of course, will look like a pretty good first item rush for any high AD users. This is like the Dravens of the world, and probably not Lethality Varus so much because of other stuff out here, but just the high AD users are going to be like, oh, sweet, Bloodthirster, cool item. Also, by the way, having good high AD items is actually really good for the game, because it means that if you're not an assassin, you've got items that are shaped like the stats you want that aren't lethality items. So I'm thinking of champions like Graves, for example, or maybe even Jhin. Jhin still wants crit, so that's probably not a great example here. But champions where they're actually not doing like Kha'Zix Zed combat patterns, and so them getting lethality does really weird things to their combat shape, where they're suddenly really bad at killing frontline because they're paying gold for flat pen, which is a bad stat when they're hitting Malphite and Ornn and stuff. So having some high AD statistics is actually a very good thing for the game, and so I'm glad BT's coming back as this. Essence Reaver, my understanding of the call here was that crit and sheen was too narrow of a binding. And so loosening it back up to essentially high AD, high ability haste, crit chance, and mana refund on auto attack instead of mana refund on Sheen trigger. So it's kind of Quick Blades' current like build path / stats, but again in a non-mythic form as a sort of simplified item with no Sheen binding. It's just a very, very good AD haste stat stick. This is the kind of item that Tristana really, really wants. Because she just wants Rapid Fire to come back up all the time, and so solidly fitting that sort of item slot. Kraken Slayer, as mentioned, no more crit on the item. The unique passive getting changed from hit them 9 times to get full value to just simply gain more damage based on how low health they are. It's like a 1.5x amp if they are low, and then also has percent move speed as a core stat. So it is a little bit on hit biased because your attack speed literally changes the on hit damage because you're hitting more often. But again, core percent move speed as a stat. ADAS move speed is the stat profile here with an on hit sort of thing going on. Yeah, overall, I think going to be a pretty neat item. We'll see who the users are, but that's that. Lord Arm's Regards getting simplified down to no Giant Slayer, but more percent armor penetration. Obviously, we can always retune items as needed to be the right level of powerful. I'm personally a fan of this unique passive not existing. I think percent armor pen and having sustained damage are already things that make you anti-tank as a class overall. If we have to nerf things like Frozen Heart and Randuin's because tanks are no longer killable, I think that's fine. That's very doable. I'm just personally a fan of simplifying items because, honestly, LDR already says you buy this against tanks when it has percent armor pen on it, and it doesn't need the extra text. And so, personally, I don't believe this needs to have more text, so I think this is a good idea. And again, if it's weak, we can just always retune things. It's not a big problem. Mercurial Scimitar is getting lifesteal back. I believe it's retaining its crit. If I'm wrong, sorry, I might have overlooked this, but I know it's getting lifesteal back, and not much else to say there. The Phreak Blades is getting reimagined entirely. It is now one of the core AS items. It is AS crit move speed, and it no longer has spell amp. That unique line is gone. It is basic ability refund on auto attack. And so if you need so again, keep in mind that we are getting rid of all the AD AS crit items. So if your build is like Bloodthirster or Infinity Edge or Essence Reaver, and you're like, well, now I need my AS item. It's like, well, you can get the AS item called Navori Quick Blades. This AS item gives you ability refund. So if you really want ability refund, that's the AS item you want. Compared to Phantom Dancer, which just gives you a ton of AS. I think it just gives you more core stats, but doesn't give you the refund, and so you're getting stats instead. And so you kind of make the direct comparison there, right? Rapid Fire Cannon is going back to AS plus crit again. It's building out of Zeal, so it's doing that. I thought the AD crit version of RSC was totally reasonable. That said, just they're picking it as one of the attack speed options. I think that's fine as well. I don't have strong feelings about this, really. I just know that they're going back to, again, trying to have two stat profiles. And so this is, again, AS crit move speed. And so, again, right, there's a bunch of move speed items that are quite good. Hooray. Hurricane. Hurricane is actually going to have more AD ratio on the bolts. The on-hit effect is going away. Otherwise, it's still attack speed, move speed, crit, fire, bolts out. But it's going to be shaped to be much more strong for AD users because it's going to have, like, functionally, 30% more damage per bolt. I think the current changes from 40% total AD to 55% total AD per bolt, which is a very, very big deal. Static Shiv, as like with Kraken Slayer, is going to pure ADAS. I don't believe this one has move speed on it. I could be wrong. But the effect is, instead of having the energized paradigm, it is lightning on kill. So right now it's a 3-second cooldown to bounce to 6 targets whenever you kill a minion. And so you'll generally get it about twice per wave based on how fast you clear the wave. If you kill it really, really slowly, you might get it on all 3 melees, but by that point the cast is basically all dead. Either way, whatever. But the cool thing is on champion kill, it's going to launch a much stronger bolt. And we can tune everything around it. There's no cooldown. We can change the bounce radius. We can change the damage. The damage is already different. But this is kind of saying that, okay, if you get a kill, you get this really big chain lightning. It's going to help you kind of do a team fight snowball. And if you don't ultra need crit in every slot, here's Shiv or Kraken or whatever. I'm interested to see how these builds all pan out long term, who wants to skip a crit slot or not. But keep in mind that because there's 25 crit chance per item, you only need 4 crit items and you have 1 bonus slot already. And so it might be that people are actually, oh yeah, we go for Shiv or Kraken first slot, and then we eventually build towards 100% crit, even if it's not going to happen in most games. The idea that you're not wasting slots here, I think, is a pretty powerful like mental tool here for players. We'll see what happens. I don't truly know, but I think it's really interesting. Storm Racer is gone. I'm not surprised. This was an item that we could never find a very good home for. Yeah, I think this is a good choice. I'm especially a fan of trying to get rid of these upfront burst mechanics on sustained classes. So one thing I find kind of odd is Dead Man's Plate. Dead Man's Plate provides a lot of upfront burst. It's not, okay, a lot of upfront burst, but like, Juggernauts and Fighters are not meant to be bursty, and here's an item that really only does something first hit here. Trinity Force, I think, is less egregious because the repeatability is so high, it's not quite so much upfront burst anymore. Storm Razor, again, you're an AD carry, you're clearly not meant to be a burst champion. Dealing a bunch of upfront damage is kind of whack here. So, again, kind of glad to see this move around. Yeah, to me, this is directionally correct, and we never really could find the right set of passes to make this item happy for us, and so it's gone. I think it's very reasonable. New item coming out, Yuntal Wild Arrow. So it's another AD crit stat stick. Right now, there's Infinity Etch. There is Bloodthirster, which doesn't have crit on it, so that's not an AD crit stat stick. There is Essence Reaver, which is AD crit, but it's got ability haste on it. And then here's Yuntal Wild Arrows, which is AD crit, and it now applies a stacking bleed on the crit. So when you crit someone, you bleed them for, I believe, 35% total AD over 2 seconds. This bleed stacks but does not renew, so if you have like 2 attacks per second and you attack someone 4 times, they're going to take 1.4 times total AD on top of it. That is a weaker line than just dealing more damage on crit outright. This is not meant to be as good as IE. I don't think this is meant to be like remotely that, but what's cool is there's a synergy with Hurricane. It does synergize with attack speed the way that crits already do, and if you happen to be a high AD champion who prints really high attack damage, congratulations, or you crit a whole bunch, you're Tryndamere or Yasuo or Yone something, here's a really good AD crit stat stick for you, which I think, yeah, it's there to be an AD crit stat stick with text that like synergizes with AD and crit is really like kind of the point there. There's probably going to be some soft synergy with things like Black Cleaver. You'll deal physical damage triggers more often and thus shred them quicker. I don't expect AD crit users to build Black Cleaver, but I don't know, it's there. Regardless, again, AD crit stat stick. Let's scroll all the way back up. Yeah, cool. The final thing is re-adding Zephyr as a cheeky 7th item boot upgrade. I didn't bother to write down all the stats here because it doesn't really matter. The whole point is you get to full build, and you're like, I could sell boots for Phantom Dancer or a GA, and you're like, nah, dude, I upgrade boots to Zephyr. I believe this item requires level 15 to buy in the first place, so you cannot and should not rush it. But at a certain point, you can pay like probably relatively bad gold efficiency to have a like full 6 item build. If this is wildly popular, I assume we'd be happy to build upgraded steel caps, upgraded merc treads, upgraded sork shoes, and just be like, no, everyone gets to go 6 item build and feel good about it. And maybe these items hold control wards or something. I don't know. I don't know the answer, to be clear. But there's something here that I think is kind of compelling. Again, my instinct is I think this is going to be wildly successful and players will be really excited about it. And then we'll do this for more items in the future. This could be wrong. But that is kind of my instinct here. Anyway, I just think it's a really exciting kind of change to make here. I'm really excited that this is happening. Yeah, boots out of Zephyr, or Zephyr out of boots, I think is just kind of hype. Alrighty, miscellaneous item changes. A lot of these were much smaller scope, and just sort of spots where there were gaps in the itemization system that could be upgraded and improved a little bit. So let's talk about fighters real quick. Cleaver actually came out of Live Pod. We just identified that Black Cleaver was... Black Cleaver's armor shred got nerfed in the durability update of 12.10 because we knew with everyone getting more armor and more MR that items like Black Cleaver are going to be much stronger because there's more armor and MR to shred. And so for very credible reasons, Black Cleaver was nerfed to a 25% shred. And then at some point along the line, I don't remember when or how, it got moved to a 24% shred, which we moved back 25 at some other patch on the line, whatever. It was just like, I don't know what happened, who cares, whatever. At the end of the day, I'm of the opinion, and other designers had been as well, but I'm of the opinion, and it's live doing this, so this is what we're doing basically, that Cleaver should be a really, really, really core fighter item. It should be in almost every fighter build, or something similar to Cleaver. Essentially, twofold reasons. One, fighters are meant to be target agnostic. So unlike assassins and to some degree divers, but even then divers will fight regular champions as well. Assassins, part of their kit is getting target access. Part of their kit is reaching the backline Ashe and killing them. And so having the stat lethality saying you are disproportionately better at one-shotting Ashe, go find ways to do your job is the intent here. Fighters are the opposite of this. Fighters explicitly often have very poor target access. Darius cannot choose to reach Ashe. Garen frequently cannot choose to reach Ashe if the AD carry is paying attention and playing the game well. And I am a fan of secondary stats reinforcing the reality of their combat pattern, which is fighters have to hit frontline, and so you're going to go hit frontline, and so you're going to have items that you want to buy that are better at hitting frontline. I think these are all very good things, very defensible. So that's generally speaking in broad strokes point 1, which is make sure they have good items that are good at the job they're already doing because that's how their kit works. Okay. Second point is I believe fighters should be cooperative. I actually think they could be more cooperative than they are now, but Black Cleaver is a way to do this. I would personally like there to be more. Fighters are already probably the best class in the game at 1v1ing. I can't think of many champions outside of ones whose kits are perfect for this purpose, who like beat Darius or Renekton or Volibear or whatever 1v1. Again, there are some champions. Quinn beats Renekton in lane. Vayne explicitly beats fighters and tanks. Like, this is all going to happen, but no one is advantaged against a fighter in a long lane 1v1. It's why top lane is a lot of fighters, because they just win. Okay, that's fine. That's understood. That's part of the class. Okay, whatever. If that is the only thing that fighters can do, the game gets really, really one note. They just lane forever, and they get sad that their team is losing in 3 lanes, but they're losing in 1 lane. They're like, why doesn't top lane matter? It's like, well, because your mid, bot, and support all fed their asses off. 3 is greater than 1, I'm sorry. But the more that fighters are cooperative and have tools to join their team, not all the time, right? They are 1v1s to do that is fine, but the more that fighters have tools to join their team and are rewarded for joining their team, the more that it's like, okay, I got a lead, my mid lane got behind, but like, I'm gonna go join this team, and even though like my Jinx is down 600 gold, I have Cleaver, I donated 30% armor pen to Jinx, she's now better than their AD carry because I'm good, because I got us there, because I shredded their tank, and now we're killing Malphite or Rammus or whatever together. I did this. You know, this is like a little bit of personal agency for fighters, but in a way that's not just, well, I'm going to keep on joining side laning. It's my team fight output is higher. I have a reason to go join the team. And I think these are both very powerful things that are worth doing. Okay, there's the very long preamble on fighters. Okay, Blade of the Rune King. 2 sets of changes. One is moving the slow effect to on third attack. Not a lot else to say here except that it's not going to be an instant burst of slow. I know the designer thought about this. I don't know the exact rationale behind his thought process here, but he put Blade of the Rune King behind the third attack for the slow. And then the other thing was a reshape from the percent health damage on the passive into more stats instead. This has been a long time coming. Bork feels like it overly shuts down tanks when it comes online. This is meant to make the item a little bit less sharp in terms of what it's doing. In a 1-on-1 scenario, it's also going to make your death recap look like items dealt half your health less often, even though an item giving AD and AS is the item dealing damage. Don't tell anyone. But regardless, it comes down to this item being a little bit less warping and more about making your kit better. So if you have AS hooks, here's more AS. If you have AD ratios, here's more AD. And just overall less health damage. And then adding Overlord's Bloodmail, this will look a lot like old Atma's Impaler from years ago, but it's basically giving a bonus health into more attack damage conversion, as well as a missing health into more attack damage conversion, which is the old Gore Drinker thing. I believe this build path is double tunneler, so it's a stack of AD, a stack of HP, a very high price point, saying, all right, you're an AD HP stacker, have even more AD for all the HP you've built. Okay, great. Moving on to Mage's relative light touch here as well. Blackfire Torch is being added as a Lost Chapter upgrade, a sort of twin to Liandry's Torment. Instead of it doing percent health burn damage, it is a flat burn. I believe it has an AP ratio. The burn does more damage to monsters, and additionally, for every, I believe it's every champion that is burning, you gain percent increased ability power. So it's a little bit mini death cap. This was definitely, I believe, a slot that was missing in the space right now, which was mana required dot mages. So I think this is going to make Malzahar's very happy, for example. It also allows us to give these champions mana costs again because they've got a Lost Chapter item they're excited to buy, which is good. If we want to tune up mana costs, we probably can because they're going to be happy with this. Again, obviously a gap in the space. I'm happy with current Liandry's where it's a nice, like, more durable, longer duration AP fighter item. Like, that's all very good, but just, again, this is a really good change. There's also a new component that's going to build into this as well as Liandry's. I believe that component also has extra monster damage. The point here was to give mages a nice first or second back AP item to feel good about their clears. I don't know the full story here, but yeah, that's what the designer thought, is my understanding. And then also a small reshape to Luden's. Luden's going back to the older paradigm of, I believe it's a longer cooldown, but it now is it's gonna have a longer cooldown, but it's gonna store all charges at once and then blow up all the charges when that trigger rate comes in. The Ludens that we have right now on live, I believe, was done to lightly incentivize some play towards like dot mages, like knowing that Leanders is going away for them. It's like, well, Ludens has this, like, you know, pretty quick re-ramp, and every individual trigger has no fall-off. It's one at a time. So, like, if you are Malzahar and you do live Ludens and you dot someone for 8 seconds, you're going to get, like, 2 to 3 Ludens pops here, and they're going to be full value. And anyway, this is like, well, Blackfire Torch exists now, so let's not shape this. Let's make the rules simpler, and bam, here you go. Which I think is correct to do, right? When you don't need the rules anymore, get rid of the rules. Tanks. Tanks work came from LivePod. I ended up doing this work here. So I'll talk to you about it. So one, as a preamble, we are deleting Ingenious Hunter, which is the item haste rune from the game. Ultimately, its pick rate is incredibly low, but then it was so much haste in order to be like a good competitive rune that it really warped items around it. And so at the end of the day, it wasn't serving its purposes very well. It clearly wasn't getting people to be excited about other builds. It actually felt like you were locked out from using certain items out the rune, and so it was like really, just damaging the game. So with Ingenious Hunter going away, we were just simply buffing Unending Despair's cooldown to be, it's actually really close to the cooldown of if you had already had all 5 Ingenious Hunter stacks. So it's a very strong, strict buff to Unending Despair in literally all cases, because even in the case where you're going Ingenious Hunter, you get to run another rune instead, which is just like more powerful than like 0.2 seconds of the cooldown. We are deleting Anathema's chains from the game. There was an alternate version here where we're going to buff the output to try to find a niche for it, but ultimately, the way the game actually works is Anathema's is kind of a bait. It tells you it's really good against one person. People would rush it first item, but the way math often works out, you should just buy a real item instead, because early game, getting a bunch of armor or a bunch of MR is more damage reduction than the Anathema's unique passive, which meant that it was actually kind of failing its core, mental purpose here, because players weren't conceiving of the item the way that math actually worked out, which means there's a core problem with how the item was built. The second thing that Anathema's does is it gives a target negative tenacity, which is interesting. But I think the sort of stronger idea here, and the reason it's getting deleted, is I think a world in which Anathema's was good as a I hate you and you are worse item makes League a worse game, right? So imagine you're popping off on Master Yi and you're like, dude, I'm so good, I'm doing really well, I've got a bunch of items, I'm killing it. And someone goes, actually, you've got negative tenacity, you don't get to play the game anymore, you're not going to be stun locked full to dead. And as much as there is some compelling mental excitement over I got to hate Draft Master Yi in the item system, I don't think that's good for League of Legends the game. It's similar to why anti-shield is a rare stat and anti-healing is not gold efficient, because your champion is meant to actually work. That I think in general, broad strokes, the strategic layer of counter building is less important than your champion feeling good to play. And so this means items like Anathemas, or items like extremely strong Grievous Wounds, or items like extremely prevalent Shield Cut are bad for League of Legends, because they just say, oh, your champion, yeah, they don't work anymore. They don't work as well. This is different from I built armor, I'm defensive against all physical damage, versus oh no, this specific bespoke output of your kit, it's just bad now. I don't think is actually a good place for League to live. Now, to be clear, there are degrees here. I think Grievous Wounds existing some is fine. I think shield cutting existing some is fine. But I think there is a bar above which you're not allowed to have this much champion hate, and I think Anathema's is above that bar. That is obviously very opinion driven. There can be totally a different game where it's less about champions and more about strategy, and all items are about hate drafting. I don't believe that is League of Legends. You may disagree. That is understandable if you do, but this is kind of the underlying thought process here, is that we want there to be somewhat less hate drafting in the item system. Okay, moving on though, taking inspiration from the AD carry item update, which was to not have any 3-stat items. By 3-stat, I mean AD AS crit. I want to take a somewhat similar pass here on the tank system. Now, to be clear, the initial pitch here was we thought tanks were a little bit weak right now in League of Legends, and so the initial pitch was, let's find some ways to systemically buff tanks, because we don't think their kits need to do more. It's more likely that in the fallout of the post-mythic system that their items are in kind of a bad state. Let's just do a pass to make sure tank items are good, so that tank players can feel good about their items and their class and whatever. I like to upscope things though, but what I did is I basically built out my map of sort of tank items, and I looked at armor items and MR items and health items, and I was like, actually, you know what I think is true? I think resist items give too much health, and health items are just kind of bad. And that will be the way in which we're going to buff tanks here. One of them is, again, a strict buff to Unending Despair. So a couple thoughts here. I know back in the day, I might have had a video about this on this channel, which was I actually wanted tank items to have health on them more often because then your health bar would pretty cleanly show how tanky your champion was. And that is still valuable to some degree, but unless we wanted to give every single item health and armor or health and MR, I chose instead the selfish choice richness of my armor items have low health and my health items are really good, and so here we go. And so I tried to peg most items at around like 80-ish% gold efficiency of just pure tank stats, and then the rest of the item was like some other weird stuff that was either like situational defenses or like things like ability haste or health regen, which is not a core tank stat, or other random stuff like there. And basically it's like try to move things around to where it's like, I think this item provides the right amount of tankiness per slot and per gold. So Fimbulwinter and what his approach is getting a flat plus 150 health, just getting extra 400 gold worth of HP on it. Congratulations, strictly stronger item. There's additionally a reshaped unique passive where instead of giving you 8% of total maximum mana, it's 15% of bonus maximum mana, which means that basically the sort of fake math of gold efficiency puts this smack in between sapphire crystals for a Seraph's Embrace and sapphire crystals for a Manamune. Those items are very far apart in their gold efficiency of the unique passive, by the way. Not that it matters, but it's just true. Which is why gold efficiency is a fake stat, is unless you're actually mathing out the unique passive, stop using gold efficiency. It's garbage data. But essentially said, okay, well, the gold per sapphire crystal, which is a bit more apples to apples, we're going to put at a moderately high number. To the point where, okay, I went Fimbulwinter, I'm now like pretty excited to buy Roa or Frozen Heart or something, and I'm going to like use mana as a like pseudo core tank stat. And so the idea of going Roa, Fimbulwinter, Frozen Heart, I think should be totally reasonable, and I mean literally like twice as rewarded basically, which I think is a positive here overall. And again, plus 50 base health is obviously very good. Warmogs plus 250 base health. I took some regen down just because I think the item was going to get a little bit too OP. That regen is very little power overall, but Warmogs now gives a flat 1,000 health. The health threshold is still 1,300, which means basically any tank item plus Warmogs will put you into the regen threshold. So congratulations, Warmog second is very much real as long as you have like any runes and a Bomby Cinder. Very real build now. Speaking of Bomby Cinder, though, retooling the Bomby Cinder options a little bit here. So I talked with a designer who did the tank update in 14.1 and was like, hey, I think I want to give tanks a little bit more haste. How do you feel about this? Like, give me some thoughts here, brain dump me what you think about tanks. And overall, what it came down to was that we think tanks could get a little bit more haste. And looking at the overall tank system, the best place to put it was in the very target agnostic Sunfire-esque upgrades. That putting it on, you know, Randuin's Omen or something else like felt kind of strange, like very targeted, like, oh, the best way to get ability haste is to stack items that are good against auto attackers. That's bad. I think that's actually part of the reason we saw so many Frozen Heart rushes recently, was because it was one of the only good ways to get ability haste and just happened to be really anti-auto attack. And so it's like, we have to be kind of careful about that, right? That like, there's a good haste option that's not anti-auto attack and one that is. And so for example, Unending Despair being a good item is one of the other armor tank items. Says, oh, I don't need to hate auto attackers. I just want to team fight well, and I want haste and I want armor. Unending Despair actually is going to fit the purpose now better than Frozen Heart will for me, because again, we buffed the passive on this item. So Bomby Cinder is getting rebuilt into giving health and ability haste. It is giving less health overall, and its price point's going down to 900 gold, so that if you do a 7-camp clear on a tank, you can buy Bomby Cinder first recall. This should make playing tank junglers feel a lot better, because it's not that hard to get a 7-camp off. And yeah, congratulations, you now get to buy Bombys first recall and feel really, really good about your jungle clear. Cool stuff there. Alongside that, though, because the health got shrunk and the ability haste got added, and it's only 5 haste and Bombies, by the way, I didn't give it 10 haste like Kindle Gem. I also gave this haste to Sunfire Cape and Hollow Radiance. And so what this means is those items all got 10 bonus haste. And I took 150 health off of them, so that Hollow Radiance and Sunfire are more armor skewed, less health skewed as items, which is, again, trying to reinforce that you can buy your armor item, congratulations, now go build a health item. And the cool thing about these items having health ratios on the burn is to say, no, really, go buy a health item. And if you go Fimbulwinter or you go Warmogs or you go whatever, these have more than twice as much health in most cases as any other item you could buy, which makes it very clearly attractive. And so that's kind of the hope here, is that much like with AD carries, you buy your AD crit, then you buy your AS crit, then you buy your AD crit again, that you go hopefully feel good about buying a raw health item because they've been strictly buffed, and the item's been reshaped around that a little bit. Randuin's Omen is getting a small reshape here as well. Two things here. So one, it is losing a little bit of health, 50, and gaining a bunch of armor. Okay, there's three. The second is Rock Solid, the unique passive is going away. The reason I did this was because that passive was shared with Frozen Heart, which meant that if you really wanted to draft a full build of anti-auto attack, you could, and you went Frozen Heart and Randuin's Omen, you were wasting 200 gold on Rock Solid, really more than that. The passive's really strong. And it was like, oh, wow, I feel really bad buying this item because I'm just not getting text, even though both these items like clearly tell me buy this against auto attackers, especially crit auto attacker, right? Like attack speed slows are really good against auto attackers, critting auto attackers, right? Like attack speed slow really matters against Jinx and Yasuo and Yone. And the item slapped you in the face said, no, don't do this. And so depending on when you were buying Randuin's Omen, if you were buying this like second slot as your AD carry hate, it's going to be a bit weaker because they usually won't have enough crit chance left yet for the armor to be better than Rock Solid. But if you're buying this later on, especially if you have a Frozen Heart, specifically when you have a Frozen Heart, then suddenly you're not losing anything Rock Solid and you're just gaining more stats because you're getting a bunch more armor than you're losing in health overall. So again, the reshape because we want health items to be good. I want health items to be good. And just getting rid of one of the passives. One of the things as well, keep in mind, is that Randuin's Omen has 3 lines of unique text. I'm really against giving items 3 unique lines of text because at a certain point, you're muddying the point of the item. Like either this item is only systems and its stats suck, or it's wildly overpowered, or like these systems are all really, really weak, and then why is it here it's vestigial? And so like there isn't really a compelling line of reasoning that I have seen, and maybe there is one though, where like 3 lines of unique text is actually correct for an item. It might be there, to be clear, but that's my opinion right now. The final thing is I'm bumping up the active slow substantially and dropping the cooldown from 60 seconds to 90 seconds. There's a few thoughts here around active item cooldowns. One of which is compelling, is that if all actives have the same cooldown, every fight is just mash your keyword at the start, which is not ideal. That's actually one of the troubling things about active items, is that you can get in that space really kind of quickly. One way to solve that is to ensure that they have very different use cases, so that you don't cast Redemption and Renders and Lock at the same time. In case you're going to buy all 3, which is actually possible in some builds. Like I could see a support tank building all 3 of those items. And so that's, one of the things you can try to work around. But the other, though, is I am a very big fan of long cooldowns that aren't part of your base kit. So I'm a fan of long cooldown summoner spells. I'm a fan of long cooldown ultimates. I'm a fan of long cooldown item actives because it means you have a lot more texture of like, oh, they fought us and won, but that's okay. They burned Redemption in that fight. Now it's down, and we can go fight them without Redemption. Like, in a world where we're willing to print really strong actives, they need to have ultimate level cooldowns, and 60 seconds, in my opinion, is not an ultimate level cooldown. In any late game fight, that is always up for every team fight ever. Respawn timers are longer than that. Now, I don't think 90 seconds really gets us all the way there, and there's also a certain point where, like, the active cooldown feels so long, it just feels like it's a waste of a slot. I don't know what that number really is. I know 5 minutes is too long. I tried that for one playtest for Gale Force back in the day. It's not that. But anyway, at some point, there's maybe some investigation here. Okay, so that is basically it for the income tank items. I also made some changes to support tank items. So Abyssal Mask, Zeke's, and Knight's Vow were all initially concepted as support tank items. I'm going to start with Knight's Vow. So Knight's Vow is, again, getting a simplification. Instead of 10% damage redirect until they're below 30% health, then a 20% damage redirect. It's just 12% damage redirect at all points in time. This is mathematically almost identical. This technically does remove some really sharp gameplay around, oh, my Darius has popped his Sterix gauge, and so he's really low, and he's dying, so I'm going to switch to him and absorb damage from him, and like play really high APM support. There's validity in that. I think that can be a compelling thing. But honestly, the extra 10% DR, bringing him from 33% health to 36% health, roughly, is not strong enough for me to care, ultimately. I think, hey, switching who your liege is the entire time and picking someone else as worthy is already good, and the cooldown is relatively short at 60 seconds, and you can switch it before every single team fight, and you can, depending if you pre-cast it or not, you can switch it in the middle of a team fight. Like, I think the APM test for Knight's Vow is still here, but I just don't think it needs a bunch of extra lines of rules of text. I just don't think it's needed. So it's simplified. It's just 12% damage redirect. Congratulations. Second thing on the damage redirect. It is now going to redirect as physical and magic damage, not as true damage. So if you're running Knight's Vow and your target takes 500 physical damage, instead of you taking 500 physical damage, you're going to take 500 physical damage and then reduce it by your armor MR. It was always redirecting it before your opponent's resists. So the current live version of Knight's Vow, nobody's resists matter. And in this version of Knight's Vow, your resists matter. So a couple things here. I just think that obviously this is a buff, right? This is clearly a strict buff to the item. I just think this makes sense in terms of the item making sense and feeling appreciable, and you feeling good about it as the selfless tank support who is applying it to somebody else. This also lightly shapes it toward tanks and away from enchanters, which I don't really care, but it's just true. And just honestly, just at the end of the day, it's like this shape makes sense for the item, that my resists matter, my durability tools matter, my DR matters. This is what the item should be because it makes sense to players. This would make sense to me if I was buying it, like this is what should happen. The final change is a very slight shift in stat efficiency. It is losing 5 armor and gaining a rejuve bead in the build path. The point here is just to say that if, for whatever reason, the target you've declared as worthy is no longer auto-attacking and you got brought low, and maybe even you have like the APM test and you failed and you didn't like redirect somebody else to start healing you, the item itself now gives you some regen to recoup the damage that your AD carry or whoever you declared as worthy was taking. It's just a light, again, shape and like intention focus on the item that my resists matter. I get some regen because the item literally tells me I take damage, and just all these things to me make sense. The next is a stat reshape on Zeke's. One thing that I believe is true around support tanks is that they do not have the luxury of counter-building a lane opponent. Like, if you're playing Ornn in top lane, you can happily buy an armor item or an MR item if you're against Jace or Kennen or Vladimir or whatever. That luxury does not exist for Braum or Rel or whatever. And so I believe that support tanks and only support tanks should have hybrid resist items. I think Jack Show is a special case. It's a capstone. That's fine. It's generally pretty bad as a rush item. That's okay. Anyway. So what it comes down to is, we can probably do this for more items, but I'm just starting here, is I'm just making Zeke's copy Locket's build path. Kindle Gem, armor, MR. It's going to be less durable than Locket. Not only does Locket have the shield, but this item has a bit less health, a bit less armor, a bit less MR. But while Locket gives you the shield, this item gives you the Frostfire Tempest on ulti activation. Total price point's the same. You're losing 10 haste. You are losing, I think, 5 armor or so, but you are gaining 25 MR. You're losing a bit of health. Like, in overall, like, total durability stat profile, this item is basically the same. It's just, instead of getting mana and haste, you're getting some MR. So you're getting a bit more durable, you're getting a little bit less repeatability, okay, whatever, right? You can quibble around like exactly what things are losing here, but to me, the shape of supports are allowed to build hybrid resist, I think is very reasonable and correct to put in the game. There is one sad thing, which is here's the Frostfire Tempest no longer building out of red item, blue item. There's some, flavor lost there, but I think, again, this item is better. The final support tank item is Abyssal Mask. So Abyssal Mask is one of the, 8 least items built in League of Legends. And I've wanted to update this item for freaking ever. I've said this story a couple times. When we were doling out work for the 13-10 mid-season, I was, very happy to go after AP bruiser items and was given to do AD carry items instead, because, understandably, I probably do this base better. Okay, fine. Anyway, I've wanted to go after Abyssal Mask for a really long time, and I finally got the chance to. So Abyssal Mask is getting changed from a bonus health scaling flat MR shred to a percent MR shred. There's a couple small changes going around. So it is getting 100 gold cheaper. It's going to be 2,300 gold, which is solidly in offensive tank support range. It is losing 10 flat MR, but it is gaining an extra 1 MR per enemy in the aura. So in terms of teamfight MR, durability, gold efficiency, pretty similar overall. But the big gain is that the aura is no longer tied to your gold income. The aura is now just good as long as it's good in League of Legends, the game. And I think these cooperative shred style items, much like Black Cleaver, should be percent pen. Because in general, if you're like, oh, I've got many physical damage dealers on my team, I should go Cleaver to help them out. The reason you should help them out is because they're all going to buy armor, and you want to percent pen the armor. Oh, I've got a bunch of magic damage dealers on my team, and I want my team to deal more magic damage. Percent shred, because they're all going to buy a bunch of MR. That's one of the tough things about Abyssal Mask, is like, Abyssal Mask on live is low-key best when your only magic damage dealer is Azir, where they're not all buying MR, but like 20 flat pen is a crap ton of damage when no one buys MR for your Azir, who's doing half the damage in your team. So in actual practice, Item's going to have two core use cases. One is indeed that, you know, Braum or whatever can identify that his team comp has like a Karthus jungle and an Azir mid, and he's like, actually, you know, our ADC is Jhin. I'm going to go ahead and build the MR shred item and help our Talia, Karthus, or Azir or whatever deal a bunch of damage because I'm going to go help them out. And is going to be a very viable slot 1 or slot 2 item. Now, it's still predicated on you actually wanting to get like 60 to 90 MR in an item slot. Good luck wanting that. Sure, but it's going to be really good for that purpose. The other situation is I'm playing Singed or Mordekaiser or whatever. I am playing a melee magic damage bruiser type, and I actually am happy to buy an item that gives me a bunch of health and a bunch of MR. But I also want some percent pen to help me kill the enemy frontline. Here you go. And so those are going to be pretty much the two core sets of users. Is it's going to be the MR option of choice for offensive tanks, and it's going to be a tank item of choice on support tanks who have multiple meaningful magic damage threats on the team. I think both of those are pretty compelling. I think we're going to have a good amount of pick rate on this item as a result here. We're then doing a couple other changes to supports overall. This is mostly live balance stuff. So Shirley's is a live balance change. This is just selfish stats going down, 5 AP, 3% move speed. Echoes of Helia is a live balance change as well, acknowledging this item has incredibly no pick rate. I do think longer term with more scope, we could re-content this item and go back to a similar version that gave you stacks based on damage dealt, stored a bunch of charges, and then offloaded them based on how much healing you dealt or shielding you dealt. I think that is a totally compelling pitch for the item, where it functionally gets easier to stack as your skills rank up and your AP goes up and you're functionally dealing more damage in the first place, thus you're getting more stacks more rapidly. I think that shape completely makes sense. It's very reasonable, and it's something we can go to when we have the time to script it, QA it, play test it, ensure it makes sense, ensure it all works out. But that is not where we are right now. This is a live balance change. And so the change to Echoes of Helia that is currently slated for going out, those might change, we have a couple of days still left to work on the patch, is the stack cap is going from 3 to 2, and the power per stack is going up a little bit on the damage and substantially on the healing, to the point where the max stack item is always dealing more healing, and I believe is sometimes dealing less damage, in a case where you would have gotten 3 stacks, but you're only at 2 now, but pretty rare, but still, per stack's going up. It's basically acknowledging that, yeah, it is actually hard for support to hit somebody 3 times between heals in a late game team fight, so let's not ask them to do that, let's just let them hit twice, and it's just going to be full power a lot, and that's okay. Probably going to be a pretty meaningful buff. I don't think Echoes of Helia is very bad. I think it's a little weak, but it's really underappreciated because the like ability flow feels like it doesn't really make sense. And this, I think, is one of the victims of demythicking, is non-mythic Echoes of Helia just isn't really working right now. There are totally ways to fix this. We can get there. We're just not there right now. Again, low scope buff, that's all it is. Other change to Dawn Core. Dawn Core, we actually plan to do work on coming into the patch. There's still live pods work. Ultimately, Dawn Core was conceived as a Enchanter capstone item, and so a lot of the value was put in the capstone sort of part of it. And this is basically a reconcept of the actual place in the game a like capstone tier support item, Enchanter item would be. If you look at an item like Death Cap, you're actually willing to buy Death Cap second if you get really far ahead and you're just like, well, I just have double NLR in this base, YOLO Death Cap second. That was kind of the space the item actually lived in. And of course, if you really want to buy it third, you're almost always buying it fourth. And the fact that Death Cap was that good, even as an early slot, was actually kind of the inspiration here for the item work. Basically, Dawn Core is a much stronger item when you buy it second. If your build path is like Solstice Slay into Shirelia's into Dawn Core, the item is much stronger on that slot. So basically, the Summoner Haste is gone, the ability haste is gone, but the item now gives a ton more ability power, and a ton more heal and shield power. So the item just gives AP, heal, shield power, mana regen, and then more heal and shield power based on other mana regen sources. But it's much more skewed towards the upfront instead of the capstone nature. Because the point here is not to try to goad you into saying, oh, it's time for your 4th slot. Hope you have 2,700 gold and you don't want wards anymore. It's, yo, you're slamming this game. You know what? I know you rush redemption, but like, you want a Dawncore, bro? And that's kind of the point here, is to say, if you are getting ahead, you can go Dawncore second. And if your kit is really strong, it might just be correct for you to go Dawncore third. It's still going to be the most expensive Enchanter item, but it's only about like 300 to 400 gold. Like, it's 1 to 2 minutes of having to wait. It's not that bad. But it's meant to be, no, you're going to have the biggest heals and shields. That's the reward. You are going to have the biggest heals and shields. That's the up of this item. It is essentially kind of not close. I know that Moonstone sits in a fairly similar space here. It's also percent more healing and shielding. Honestly, these items work together. I think that's okay. Regardless, that is sort of the design of the item. We very briefly considered a version that built out of Dark Seal, and then think about it some more. It was like, enchanters are already very, very safe. I don't want Mage's functionally to be a core like itemization purchase. Like the level we'd have to retune this item to not be the best item that you buy every single game on a class that only dies 3 times per game didn't seem reasonable. And Mage's is already honestly pretty purchasable on a lot of enchanters already. So briefly thought about it, gave it some thought, and was like, nah, we're not going to do that. Okay, one of the designers spent time on the seasonal update looking at the boot system. Ultimately, the largest change is a rework to boots of mobility. They are quest boots. So when you buy them, they are pretty inexpensive. They only give you 35 flat move speed until you complete the quest. The quest is run around a lot. It's like run around for about 10 minutes, roughly, is the way it times out here. When you finish it, it gives you 45 move speed, which is like normal boots too, but it gives you that 90 total out of combat move speed. It's another 45 when you're out of combat. So it is quest boots that sort of unlocks boots of mobility. But while you are filling the quest, and while the quest is also done, you get empowered recall. You get Baron recall for the entire game. So you get a bunch of tempo around the map if you're going to take a lot of recalls. Like if you're going to, restock your Sightstone and whatnot, right? So you get empowered recall at all points in time, and then when it's upgraded, you get full mobies. There were some explorations of other boots, some of which we are pulling. I believe Mercury Treads is going to keep Fairy Tenacity. Swifties, I know, has seen it on PvE. I believe that's getting reverted to live. We tried things like flat AD boots, didn't go for it. A couple other things, but I think ultimately the primary one is the Mobi's rework, and I think it's a pretty cool set of boots. Okay, next big set of changes is there's a big sweeping set of rework to a bunch of runes. I think this is really, really good stuff. I think the designer did a really good job with creating some really cool runes. And so first things first, lethal tempo is being deleted from the game. So I talked earlier in the AD carry system about how we really wanted attack speed purchases to matter. Not getting all of your AS sources from a single rune is a good way to make attack speed purchases matter. This is a pretty big deal. The reason that we did not nerf Cogmon last patch because we are removing the tempo from the game, and we expect this to be a very big Cogmon nerf. I don't think he has nearly as good of rune replacements. That said, we knew that we were going to be switching AD carries over to other runes. We know they can go Fleet, they can go Conqueror, theoretically, they can go Press the Attack. And Conqueror is reasonable on some champions already. We'll see, of course, more move over time. Press the Attack is no longer a team-wide damage amp. It is now a selfish damage amp. Personally, I'm a very big fan of moving toward selfish damage amps unless you are very clearly opting into the team-wide nature. There's things like Black Cleaver and Abyssal Mask. But often your rune choice is much more champion-bound and it can't be game context-bound. Almost never, right? So Press the Attack is still hit someone 3 times, deal bonus damage, but now it is, while that mark is active, you just deal more damage to champions. Instead of you do more damage to that champion, you just deal more damage. Your teammates no longer deal more damage to that guy, but you trigger PTA and now you deal more damage. So it's way better as a selfish amp, and it is no longer a teammate damage amp. Overheal is getting removed. It basically doesn't have a user base. It is switching to Absorb Life, which honestly, there used to be an old rune called Feast that did something like this. But this is get some health when you kill a minion. I believe this has no cooldown. It's just a health per minion kill. And so this is basically lane sustain for precision users, as opposed to Triumph, which is lanes will sustain for team fighting, right? Legend Tenacity is going away. We are continuing on the line of getting rid of Tenacity in non-reactive locations. So this is Merc Treads exist if you see the enemy team and you're not a precision or resolve user in the first place anyway. And so look, if you want to switch your stat shard over, everyone has access and you can go to your rune page and it's pretty easy to get to. And you can react and change one thing. That's not too bad. And it's also not so much that it's like gonna be kit warping. But when you see these champions, go, okay, it's a Merc Treads angle. You see this champions, go, it's a Wits End angle. You see this champions, it's a Sterix Gauge angle. I think that is a more appropriate place for it. But also, I think there should be a relatively reasonable cap on the amount of tenacity in the game, because some champions are meant to be able to self-combo. And you can't, like, here's the weird thing, right? Is if tenacity makes their self-combo not work, and tenacity is incredibly prevalent, your champion just no longer self-combos, which means they just have to have knockups. Then you go players saying, what the hell, Riot? Why are you printing knockups everywhere? Tenacity just doesn't matter anymore. And it's like, this is the self-defeating circle, right? And so, this is tough, right? It could be that, like, no, we have a really hard stance on only these abilities are allowed to hard combo and they're forced to knock you up or suppress you in order to make sure that always happens. Or I don't know, right? Like, that's a really deep rabbit hole that I haven't dug and looked into very heavily. But regardless, I think ubiquitous tenacity is a good thing to get rid of, and then say you've got to opt into this, and we get to be a lot more careful about which classes we give it to. I think that's actually very valuable. It's being replaced by basic ability haste. Basic ability haste. That's it. That's all to really say. Cut down is being reshaped from basically just deal more damage to champions who are high HP. So opposite of coup de grace. Simple rune to understand. Okay, great. This is very good if you are basically poking. If you're hitting people who are high health, here's a very good rune for you. Predator is getting deleted from the game. We were not willing to let this item or this rune be good. It's been sitting there in the runes tab being bad for a long time. Finally, removing it from the game. Halo Blades now has a ranged mod, so that it is not quite so warping for the laning phase of range supports. This is your, Ashe AD carry nerf functionally. Sudden Impact is getting replaced. Instead of giving you lethality for a bit of time, you're going to get a burst of damage on your first attack or ability after doing the dash or leading stealth or whatever. I don't know the entire logic behind this one, but this is what the designer wanted to do. I believe this is still living in the same spot as Cheap Shot, if I recall correctly. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. So it's there's just a different version of deal a burst of damage. One is when you CC, one is when you leave stealth or whatever. I don't have a lot to say about this, but just letting you know, this is the change. Ingenious Hunter also getting deleted from the game because ultimately this is, again, a rune that people weren't really using and was honestly having us have to rebalance items around it, which kind of sucks, so gone. Find of Life is getting reconcept. I actually like this a lot. The logic was, hey, this thing required 2 conditionals for a minor rune, which seems kind of weird to have 2 conditionals here. And so Font of Life, instead of when I CC somebody and then you auto-attack them, you get a small hot that is going to be very hard to appreciate. Now it's when I CC somebody, me and either the closest ally or the most injured ally or something nearby gets a burst of heal. So it no longer requires my teammate to do something for me to get the value out of this rune. It is also not turn somebody into a heal pinata, which I don't think is a reasonable shape for a minor rune. There's no way to actually like play around that. I'm a fan of like removing some of the pattern requirements of runes. I think they just like shouldn't take that much mind share. So I think it's like good directionally design wise. It's good for appreciability. It's good for a lot of reasons. I think it's a really good redesign. First Strike is being shifted around a little bit. It is actually going to be more of a damage amp rune and less of a gold generation rune. My personal opinion of this rune is that I would have gone the other way and made First Strike a gold generation rune and not a damage amp rune, because I think we have other damage amp runes. That said, this doesn't mean that I am right. It just means that was my first instinct of what I think this rune is about. But what it comes down to is that First Strike is going to have more damage amp, and it's actually going to have more upfront gold earned on just I landed like Lucian W and then left. But the conversion of more damage into more gold is going to be lower. And I can totally buy this from the argument of like, hey, just not wanting this item, this like rune to print you like a full item or something, I think is actually very defensible as well. So like, again, I'm not saying that I'm right in sort of making it more about gold and less about damage. But regardless, this is going to generate you less gold, period. Going to do a little bit more damage, not a ton. And I guess if you're doing very, very small amount of damage, you're just like triggering on cooldown for like just a Katarina Q. You'll generate a little bit more gold until you get to late game. Futures Market, really, really cool redesign. I think it's a lot. This is a really, really smart redesign. Players really disliked running Futures Market. It was really, really rare for how strong it was. Some of this is, hey, I have a rune that literally removes money from me. That kind of sucks. Going into debt kind of sucks. Having to do the math on can I buy this item or not, I need to have my runes panel open and then say, okay, this item costs 2,000. My debt limit is 235. Okay, so I need to have 1,770. Okay, and it's like, there's a lot of things that are wrong with this for a minor rune. So I think a really, really smart redesign here from the designer here. Cash back, when you finish a legendary item, get 6% of its total gold back. Pretty simple stuff. Keep in mind, this cannot finish your first item earlier in any way at all. You cannot finish Ludens faster, but you'll have some money back when you finish Ludens. You will get 6% of around 3,000 gold. So you'll be able to maybe afford, if you recalled a little bit late, an amp tome on towards your second item. And so your second item is going to be 180 gold cheaper. Your third item is going to be 320 gold cheaper. Your fourth item is going to be 480 gold cheaper. Cool. I think it's actually really cool. I think this works. It actually serves a relatively similar purpose to Futures Market in terms of, ways of printing you free gold. Absolutely very reasonable. And just done in a really clever way that like, oh, I understand why they run this rune. I don't have to feel bad. I just always feel good. Just like absolutely slam dunk, really good redesign. Time Warp Tonic is being moved around from diffuse, like, get part of your potions early, run fast while using the potion, like, all a bunch of weird stuff, and it's like, no, dude, this rune does one thing. It's a minor rune. It does one thing. Like, yes, please, thank you. Great, great choice. What this does is say, hey, you get 40% of your potions for free up front. If your healing potion is 150 health over 12 seconds, it's still 150 over 12 seconds, but you also get 60 at the front, just on top of it. And so this is Time Warp Tonic saying, hey, congratulations, your potions are all 40% better, and you get that 40% better all at the start. This is a really, really good landing phase rune for early trades. And I'm glad it's like, here is what it's for, here's what it does. It's powerful, yes, indeed. It's not going to be like 2 to 3 like random small things that are hard to appreciate. It's just, it does one effective thing. Congratulations. Great job. Minute Materializer is going away. Another low appreciability, not exciting rune is now an entirely new rune called Jack of All Trades. So Jack of All Trades gives you ability haste per unique stat gained from items. And then at various thresholds of unique stats gained gives you a chunk of adaptive force. Now, I fully expect this to be a rune that people will hard optimize, and it'll be very good on specific champions. And you'd be like, oh, actually, yeah, I'm playing AP Kaisa, or sorry, I'm playing Hybrid Kaisa, so I know I'm getting AD, AS, crit, move speed, multiple sources of penetration potentially, ability power, ability hit, and it's like, okay, fine, right? You just identify like, I am this kind of champion, I'm gonna have this many stats. That's okay. That's reasonable. If you're a tank, suddenly getting a mana item is good. So now you like will think about Frozen Heart or whatever a bit more often. Getting an item with health regen matters a bit more. And so there's going to be some set of like, here are the champs whose builds make sense here. And there's gonna be some set where it's like, here are the champs where you pick this and you like change 2 items or like 1 item because it gives you 2 extra stats and it's worth it for like an adaptive force breakpoint. Overall, the idea of this rune, super sick. Love it. What will happen long term? I believe it'll be hard bound to certain champions. And I think that's okay. That's not necessarily a problem. Lethal Tempo has very specific users that would use it. Game health, other things out of the way. It's like, yeah, only some champs run Aftershock. Of course. But yeah, I think really cool rune. And then additionally, the inspiration rows have moved around because of this. So Flash Traption and Boots are still on tier 1, but now Cashback is joining them. So this is like vaguely free things, the row, I guess. Time Warp, Tonic, Triple Tonic, and Biscuits. This is now the consumable row altogether. So Time Warp moving down. Time Warp moving up, Triple Tonic moving down, and then Biscuits, of course, still being here. And then Cosmic, Insight, Approach Velocity, and Jack of All Trades is sort of the like gain free stats row in a way. I guess is the way I can call it. I think, generally speaking, pretty clever stuff, pretty cool stuff here. And I believe, right, there's one more thing here that I actually didn't write in the preamble up top. So there's some gold XP changes. So this is one thing that came out of LivePod that I did that was actually pre-planned work. So the first version of this came out in March for internal testing. So we soaked it for a really long time. And what it came down to was an acknowledgement that looking at champion durability overall, the fastest dying victims in League of Legends by a lot are essentially all bot lane marksmen. And so in a world where we want to have some level of consistent combat pacing, gold income notwithstanding, gold income is going to change combat pacing. It's going to happen, right? 6 on Akali will just always kill you faster than 2 on Akali. There's just no way around this, right? Like, unless we want Akali to not have a champion fantasy that scales, that's just how this works. That said, the outliers are very clearly exactly Yuumi and a bunch of bot lane marksmen, and then like a couple of mid lane mages who are like kind of frail. Now I think long term we can go look at some of those mid lane mages and like tweak them a little bit to make sure that, you know, there's like a threshold maybe that we want to reach in terms of like, you know, average combat durability. But this is largely for the fact that, hey, one, again, combat pacing, champion durability is exceptionally skewed away from bot laners. Okay, acknowledged. The second thing is junglers feel like they are incredibly weak for how powerful they are. I've mentioned this several times. I regret a lot of the jungle nerfs that we shipped in 1320 because it made them feel a lot more powerless, even though jungle is still the most important role in the game by a lot. So first things first, the way to give basically more durability to various AD carries is to give them more experience. For the average marksman, for the average champion, levels give more durability than damage. Just in general, it's going to tend to be true. Gold tends to give more damage than durability, and so in any way that we can give champions more XP and less gold, the game just gets more durable, right? Because no one buys 100 health and 12 armor unless you're a tank. Sorry, AD carries literally never will, but this is what they get for leveling up, right? So skewing the game towards levels away from gold will make the game more durable overall. Broad strokes, okay, great. So because the duo lane are the champions who are dying the most quickly, we are increasing duo XP from 116% to 124%. Now, to be fair, this is also if you're sharing it with 3, 4, 5, or if you're playing Hexakill 6, which I don't think is in the game, but, you know, whatever. This is ultimately about 7% more XP in a world where you are sharing XP with at least one other champion. This is not a ton, but it is something, okay? Okay. The second thing is we are giving junglers more experience. We're giving them more experience in their camps themselves. Basically, as soon as your camps respawn, the base XP per camp is up, in some cases, 20%. That said, keep in mind that some of the XP you gain is from your jungle pet as well, and from feeding treats and whatnot. The end goal here, the end result, is meant to be that... so right now, in the average game of League of Legends, a jungler or a bot laner are about 1.5 to 2 levels behind their mid laner on average. The goal here is to bridge this by about 1/2 to 1 level, roughly, so that that gap is a little bit smaller, and we bring up the bottom end some. So support's going to get more XP, jungler's going to get more XP, AD carry's going to get more XP. And the nice thing is that junglers, anytime they're, you know, shoving out a wave, basically, even though they get less XP from minions because of their jungle item rules, they're also inheriting this as well. And so, you know, junglers are getting kind of both sides here, and then bot laners are getting kind of just this one. So we're giving more XP to essentially 3 roles in the game. We're giving a little bit more XP to mid and top as well, right? If your jungler ganks and shoves a wave with you as a top lane, you're getting 7% more XP from that wave encounter. If your support runs over and cashes out some support stacks, you're getting 7% more XP from that wave encounter. Like, every champion is going to gain some more XP, just disproportionately, you know, duo lanes, right? And disproportionately junglers, because we're literally buffing jungle camps. We are also adjusting kill gold alongside this, right? As I said, I want to bring XP up and gold down. So negative bounties, basically, this is essentially, when you die, if you're on a streak greater than 1, your kill gold is reduced from 300 by, on live, 20%, which is now going to be 25%. For whatever reason, in code, there is a random, like, plus 0.7 or something. I forget. The engineer showed it to me and was like, that's weird. I don't know why it's here. Essentially, your, like, first decremented streak is softened meaningfully, which is why you're, like, 264 instead of, you know, 240 or whatever. But then it's 20% consistently from there on. So basically, the amount your gold decrements is being increased by about 25%. The decrementing is 25% increase. This ends up being, like, if you drag someone down to, like, being worth 100 gold, you're only getting about 100 less gold, period, off of the kill streak against them. If you just, like, chain kill them down for forever, that you're not getting that much less gold, but it is a small amount of less gold given to somebody who is absolutely hard death streaking. And then additionally, we are also lowering the amount of gold bounty given away by someone who is positive streaking. So CS streaks are getting nerfed in terms of how long it takes until you get a CS streak bounty, and then also how much gold is added to your bounty per CS streak. So actually a fairly meaningful drop in CS streaks. And then kill streaks are being dropped by, I believe it's 25 and then 50 gold forever. So any given champion bounty is going to be like about 50 gold less, and then maybe sometimes more if it's a CS and a kill bounty together. So shutdown's going to be less impactful. It's going to give less gold. Chain killing somebody is going to be a little bit less impactful as well. The base kill gold is still 300. First blood is still 300. All that kind of stuff. Your maximum kill bounty, if you get 17 kills in a row, is still 700. That's kind of unchanged. So the maximum amount given in a shutdown can still be that high. It just takes longer to get there. So basically a little bit less gold earned through PvP combat. And additionally, one thing I didn't write down is XP changes. There are a bunch of rules in place around how much XP a champion is worth. So there's two things. So one is there's a table for if champion is this level, give it this much XP. Just there's a table, if this level is much XP, it scales very aggressively with level. Basically level like 12 champions are worth massive amounts, and before that it's very little. Basically late game kills worth a ton of XP. They're really, really valuable. This ends up being a subtle combat mechanism because if you win a late game team fight, you get a ton of XP. That exists. Okay. That's not changing. There's another thing, which is if you have a very large level disparity, you will get bonus XP. That's also not changing. So this is why late game supports suddenly catapult up in levels late game, because they start assisting in like level 13, 14, 15 champion kills, and they just get a ton of XP for that. And so you'll see like suddenly you'll get high levels on winning team supports late game. That's also not changing. The final change, though, which is changing, is there's another rule in place which says if you are killing somebody and the kill is assisted, lower the XP by some percentage. That penalty is fairly meaningful in the early game. It's like 1/3 off. Then in the mid game, roughly, it's about 18% off. And then at level 9, there's no longer a penalty. Now, that thresholding, if I understand correctly, is the level that you are when you get the kill. That makes kind of weird situations because it means that like you can get to a point where your level 12 mid laner gets more XP from a kill than your level 8 like AD carry or support, because they're hitting that shared penalty, but maybe not getting enough from like the XP delta thing, for example, right? That is kind of weird. I think there is a better version of this where it's like much more softened. I didn't go very high scope here. Ultimately, I just sort of added a small level 9 plus XP penalty, where it's not as severe as the level 7 XP penalty, but there is one for assisted kills. The point here was actually meant to reclamp some of the duo and jungle XP gains, in that these champions are actually already very strong. Like jungle is already very good. AD carries are already very good. Players don't feel this way, and so I'm trying to see if we can do changes that make them feel better about themselves, but take power away in subtle ways that aren't appreciated at all. And so you're literally going to be higher level. You're going to have less shutdown gold and less shutdown XP. And the reason this is here, by the way, is because statistically, though junglers and bot laners are underleveled, and so that's why there's XP changes here, they are also the most likely to be involved in champion combat late game. And so to like claw back some of the XP given away via just printing free XP onto these champions, clawing it back a little bit via late game champion kill gold, because AD carries and junglers disproportionately are involved in these combats. And so it's a way to sort of, again, claw back sort of this level of change. Hopefully, it makes bot laners and junglers both feel a lot better about their champions in the game. This has been the patch preview. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.